Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover the true, lasting legacy of the Portuguese governors in India. We're going to peel back the layers of history here to see exactly how a desperate quest for trade completely reshaped naval warfare, territorial boundaries, and, surprisingly, even what we eat for dinner tonight.
So, to kick things off, let's tackle a really common historical myth. Did Vasco da Gama actually discover India? We hear this phrase tossed around in history books literally all the time, right? But is it actually accurate?
Well, spoiler alert, the answer is no. India was already super well known. The subcontinent already had these deep, long-standing commercial contacts and overland trade routes with Europe. But what happened in 1498, what Da Gama actually did do, was discover the absolutely crucial maritime sea route from Europe over to India.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer: the myth of discovery, de Almada's naval strategy, Albuquerque's imperial power, Da Cuna's expansion, the everyday cultural legacy, and finally, being the first in but last out.
You see, Da Gama's success didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was the result of a massive, decades-long scramble to find a new path after the Ottoman Empire blocked the ancient Silk Road back in 1453. When the Ottomans took over Constantinople, which of course is modern-day Istanbul, those traditional overland trade routes became highly dangerous and heavily restricted. It essentially forced European explorers to take to the seas. They had to find another way.
And find another way, they did. With the help of a trader named Abdul Majid, Da Gama finally reached Calicut and was greeted by the local ruler, King Zemuran. But here is the truly jaw-dropping part. He eventually returns to Europe with spices that yielded an astounding 60 times profit on his initial investment. 60 times! His travel expenses were completely covered, and those leftover spices, they practically sold for the equivalent of gold.
Which brings us to Section 1, Francisco de Almeida, the naval strategist. To manage this insanely lucrative new trade route, Portugal quickly realized they needed boots on the ground. So, they appointed their first formal governor in India, Francisco de Almeida, in 1505. Now, interestingly, Almeida didn't actually focus on land conquests. Instead, he brilliantly implemented what's known as the Blue Water Policy. Think of it like this. He basically turned the massive Indian Ocean into a giant Portuguese toll booth. His reasoning? Well, since the Portuguese discovered the sea route, any other foreign ships wanting to cross those waters simply had to pay them a tax.
Moving right along to Section 2, Afonso de Albuquerque, the imperialist.
Following Almeida came Afonso de Albuquerque. He governed from 1509 to 1515, and he's widely considered to be the real founder of Portuguese power in the subcontinent. He took Almeida's toll booth idea and escalated it into the super-aggressive Carchaz system. This effectively established an absolute monopoly. We're talking about a system where even local Indian rulers and merchants had to pay naval taxes just to sail the Indian Ocean. No one, literally not even domestic Indian kings, could trade on their own waters without a Portuguese permit.
But Albuquerque didn't stop at the water. He shifted the Portuguese strategy toward true imperialism by stepping right onto the land itself. In 1510, he actually captured Goa from the king of Bijapur. He also had a decisive victory at the Battle of Dew, and, notably, he became the very first European governor to abolish the practice of sati in his newly controlled territories. That was a massive, unprecedented intervention into local customs at the time.
Next up, Section 3, Nino da Cunha, the expander.
Now, Nino da Cunha is the guy who really cemented this imperial footprint in the decades that followed. First, he strategically shifted the Portuguese capital from Cochin directly over to Goa. Then, around 1534, he vastly expanded their coastal dominance by acquiring major territories like Mumbai, Daman, and Diu from Bahadur Shah of Gujarat. At this point, the Portuguese were deeply, deeply entrenched along the coast.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the everyday legacy.
You see, the legacy of these governors eventually moved way past naval battles and straight into everyday life. This is where history steps out of the dusty textbooks and right onto our dinner tables. I mean, think about it. It is almost impossible to imagine modern Indian cuisine today without staples like potatoes, tomatoes, and cashews. But guess what? Every single one of those was actually introduced by the Portuguese. They completely flipped the agricultural landscape upside down by bringing over things like tobacco, maize, papaya, and pineapple too.
And it wasn't just food. In addition to completely transforming agriculture, they made a massive cultural contribution by setting up the absolute first printing press in Goa back in 1556. This was a huge technological milestone that totally revolutionized how information and literature could be disseminated across the entire region, a real game changer.
Finally, Section 5, the irony of time.
As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to look at this fascinating historical irony. It's just the ultimate bookend. The Portuguese were the very first Europeans to arrive, all the way back in 1498. Yet, they were the very last ones to leave.
Think about that for a second. Long after India gained independence from the British in 1947, the Portuguese stubbornly maintained control of Goa. In fact, they didn't actually leave until they were finally ousted by the Indian Armed Forces in 1961 during a massive initiative known as Operation Vijay. Guys, that is a continuous colonial footprint of over 460 years. Just incredible.
So the really crucial point to take away from all this is that the legacy of Almeida, Albuquerque, and Da Cunha didn't just shape naval borders. It forever changed how we live, how we communicate, and absolutely, how we eat. Which leaves us with one final thought. The next time you're having a dish with potatoes and tomatoes, ask yourself, how much of global colonial history is quietly sitting on your dinner plate right now?